Hello and welcome to InnerMedia. I'm Josh Karam, and with me as always is Ted Karam.
Hey guys.
Now, we've got something exciting. Warner Brothers released a lot of movies that are coming out. Like, they are saying that we're taking everything to streaming platforms, and there's quite a few superhero movies on them.
Cool.
We've been a little parched this year. We haven't had any MCU releases, and that's something that we look forward to. So we were thinking, like, superhero. We got to do something superhero-ish because superhero movies make you feel good, right? But there's got to be some that have something deeper than just the hero beats the bad guy and you feel good about that. It can't be that simple. So, superhero talk.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
Yeah, I mean, there's deep truths in these.
So we're going to go and we're going to start with something that's an awesome one. I was so excited when I saw the trailer for this movie. I was like, this could be Inception, right? Like I saw, you saw like how the buildings flipped on themselves, and it's like, that's Matrix tier.
Matrix-ish.
I already talked about this in InnerMedia. There's the Matrix tier of films, and that made me feel that way. So this is Doctor Strange, if you haven't guessed already. The writers were John Spatis, Scott Derrickson, C. Robert Cargill, and it was directed by Scott Derrickson. It stars many famous people: Benedict Cumberbatch, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Rachel McAdams, Benedict Wong, Max Mikkelsen, and Tilda Swinton. Just to name a few of the amazing stars that were stacked in this cast.
Yeah, they were great.
Before we get into talking about Doctor Strange, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, go out and see it.
Check it out.
It's pretty good. It's really good. And
it's well worth watching.
One of my, I will say, top 5 Marvel movies, definitely for me.
Yeah.
No doubt that it is in that category.
Pretty phenomenal. And again, the spiritual truths are phenomenal, really. I mean, we're going to talk about some of them today.
Yeah. Well, let's start off with a good Master Wizard Jedi quote from the Master, the Ancient One here. The Ancient One is talking to Stephen Strange, who's played by Benedict Cumberbatch in this scene. The Ancient One says, "You cannot beat a river into submission. You have to surrender to its current and use its power as your own." And then Stephen Strange says, I control it by surrendering control. That doesn't make any sense. And then the Ancient One says, "Not everything does, not everything has to. Your intellect has taken you far in life, but it will take you no further. Surrender, Stephen. Silence your ego, and your power will rise."
Oh my God.
Now, I don't even need to ask you a question. Just go, Ted, go right into dissecting that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just beautiful, right? I mean, and this is what we're faced with in life a lot of times, just how do we tap into that energy? How do we tap into that power within us? And it doesn't make sense to the conscious mind, to the rational analytical thinking mind. It doesn't make any sense. How do I surrender to be able to use this power as my own? So really it comes down to this. What we want to remember is what is surrendering. Surrendering in this case is, and this is the big takeaway of this movie, if you ask me. It's huge. It's about harmonizing with the whole of life. It's about merging and becoming one, unifying with presence, with divine presence. How do we do that? We've talked about it before. It's all about being still, cultivating stillness, cultivating silence, getting beyond ourselves. And that's where, when we're perfectly still, when we're perfectly centered in our being, that's when we go from that individual awareness, and our awareness expands. It's free to expand, and we go from being the water drop to the whole pond. We go from being just a little entity to one with all of life. And when that happens, we unify with the whole. Now, what's important about that? The whole is feeling and sensing our vibration. The divine God hears our prayers and responds in kind. So the energy we send out, as we sow, so shall we reap. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Now the vibration that we're sending out is being heard by the whole of life, and it's responding to it. Why? Because you are unified with it, but you're not unified with it if you are still there, if who you know yourself to be is still there, because that's just the individual self. So she says, silence your ego and your true power will rise. Be still and lose your separate sense of self, your individual identity, as you unify with the whole of life, as you wake up to the universal nature of your being. And this is so powerful because this is where that portal opens within you and your light shines forth. Your light emerges. What is that power that's rising in you? It's the real you. It's the light of your being. And so it makes perfect sense when you hold it in that, Stephen says it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. You cannot influence the power of the universe. You cannot cooperate with the energy, the divine energy that is the one energy that's flowing in all things. Remember the analogy of the ocean, right? And the waves on the ocean. When we're only at the surface level of consciousness, when we're only in beta brainwaves, when we're only analytical, logical, rational thinking mind, then we are separate. We're just one wave and everything is separate from us. We're not unified with anything. When we sink down into the stillness, when we silence the ego, when we get beyond our reactive conditioning, when we come home here and now into the center of our being and we become still, that's when now we become one with all that is. In perfect stillness, we lose our individual sense of self as we expand into our universal nature. So this is where it makes sense. Surrendering means to quiet, to quiet down, to still ourselves within so that we can unify with all of life.
So let's talk about Stephen for a second. With surrendering and such, he's a surgeon. He's a very renowned surgeon. He is one of the best. He's very cocky with it, and he cares about material possession a lot, right?
Yeah, he's a good surgeon.
To measure his value.
His value.
Now, he's very vain, but of course, being a surgeon, he cares about people a lot. He doesn't want to take lives, which is a great quality that he has. Of course, his talent is taken away from him because he's driving his car way too fast, calling people, and gets in a car accident, and his hands are completely destroyed. He's not able to hold anything steady, so he's like, I need to find a way to heal himself, so he spends all his money, all his material possession that he thought was worth something on trying to cure his hands, and he can't. So he hears of this guy who is paralyzed, but is walking again, and is able to move, and he says, this doesn't make any sense, and later on in the movie, he is talking to the Ancient One, and he's like, all these medical terms that don't make any sense, and he's trying to understand it in a medical logic. So when Stephen Strange is hearing all this stuff, he basically says, this doesn't make any sense, all this mysticism and crap. I mean, you're asking me to open my mind to the possible. What possibilities? You want me to believe in the impossible, about a fairy tale, about chakras and energy and the power of belief. I came here because I believed you could help me, not turn me into a magician. So one of the big questions I think that arises is this idea of surrendering to an intellectual mind seems ridiculous because surrendering, what does that mean? I understand everything. You're asking me to believe in something that doesn't exist to my rational mind.
It doesn't fit in that model.
Why do I surrender to something that doesn't exist?
Yeah. And that's where it all comes down to experience, direct experience. See, when we have a direct experience of something, it becomes real for us. So what does she do? She helps him experience his body without his body. He's outside of it in his what call the astral plane. So he's experiencing energy outside of his physical body. He's experiencing himself beyond what his intellect knew to be true. And that's why it doesn't make any sense. That's why it doesn't make any sense for him, because he as a physician, as a scientist, approaching the world just from that level of high level beta, analytical, logical, rational thinking mind, it doesn't make sense. Because the rational, logical thinking mind only sees a very small picture of reality. It only uses what it can see, what it can hear, what it can touch. Those very small bandwidths of vibrational energy that it's translating. That's it. That's the picture it goes by. But there's so much. There's such a bigger picture. There's so much more to life than that, and that's what he realizes through the direct experience. Definitely. There's a vast world beyond our senses, our 5 physical senses. And if we only look at and we only perceive reality through them, and we then think and our thoughts are totally around physical forms and there's nothing but that, then we live in a very limited world. We live in, and so we only, so then there is no, then you would be considered a magician, right? If you could do things that are dealing with energy, change your energy, and you change the field, and you change the particle, you change the manifestation of the field of energy changes, and so the vibrational characteristics change, and so through that principle of cymatics we talked about before. Cymatics, what does that mean? That means frequency establishes form, vibration gives birth to form and function. So we change the field, we change the vibration, and it changes the forms we perceive. But up until then, Stephen was unaware of that. And he was considered, very bright, and in the world of science, in the world of medicine, he was. But it's still such a limited piece of a larger whole.
Yeah.
So he woke up to that.
Exactly, and she even goes on about, like, no, Mr. Strange, I know how to reorient your spirit to heal your body, like talking about stuff that he's like, that's impossible.
Airy-fairy.
Cellular regeneration, that can't be possible.
Yeah.
And so another question I think that gets brought up is that at the end of the film, he decides to become a magician. He defends the plane from all the outer planal beings from different realms that wish to destroy the Earth, but he looks at his hands in the end, and they really aren't fixed to his standard. You know what I mean? He still has the pain with him, and like not being able to hold things exactly. He's able to do amazing things. I mean, he defeats Dormammu by tricking him to go into a cycle loop. But I think this also ties into a conversation between the Ancient One and Mordo, which is Chichewell's character, where the Ancient One tells Mordo this line, "We never lose our demons, Mordo. We only learn to live above them." So, with Doctor Strange's hands, first, I guess it's two questions, right? Are his hands healed? And what are these demons that we're talking about here? Is it really the outer worldly evils they're talking about, like Caecilius and Dormammu?
Well, that's the projection of it.
Yeah.
That's the, so remember, life is like a mirror. So everything we perceive outside is a projection. So we never lose our demons. A great saying. We learn to live above them. What does that mean? So that means we're still in the world. We're still in human form with all of the shortcomings and that come with limited forms. But we remember that we're not limited to our bodies. In other words, our awareness has expanded beyond them, and we know thyself. So we're still expressing through the forms, but we're no longer limited by the forms. And that brings a true sense of freedom as the real you begins to emerge, as you begin to feel and sense yourself beyond your body. Now, we're all in a place of development, growth, and unfoldment, right? So there truly is a perfect you that's created eternally. And it's a divine imprint. It's a universal pattern. And so the opportunity here is to know that we don't have to try and fix ourselves. We don't have to try and improve ourselves even. When we get into the deepest aspect of ourselves, what we want to do is reveal the truth. We want to awaken from the dream of limitation and allow our inner light to emerge. That inner light casts away shadows of darkness, separation, lack, and limitation. That inner light, what are shadows of darkness? Shadows of darkness are limitations, dis-ease, dysfunction. To the degree we allow our inner light to shine forth, to that same degree, we reveal wholeness. We'll say, my hands are healed, my heart is healed, my leg is healed, my body is healed. But what really is happening is the wholeness that was always there, the truth of your real being, the light of your true being is being expressed. So what happens is wholeness returns, and it looks like healing happens. So we may see in a future version of this movie that his hands do become totally healed as he continues his journey. In other words, as he allows more and more of that inner light to shine forth. That inner light is what does the work.
Yeah. Well, Doctor Strange 2 is coming out soon. I think next year they're saying
Is
the
it?
second one will be released.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
so we'll see what happens with Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Supposedly we'll get clues in the WandaVision TV show. So who knows? Who knows?
It's kind of like that challenge. Remember the Ancient One? What is it? The Ancient One?
Yeah.
Yeah. She brings him to the top of Mount Everest and leaves him there.
Yeah.
And he's freezing. You know, it's really adapt or perish.
Yeah.
Right. Charles Darwin said that it's not the strongest that survive. It's not the smartest that survive. It's those most able to adapt. So being able to, adapt is what we're all challenged with today, especially in our world right now. Challenges that we have in our lives, they're calling us to express a greater truth, to become a better version of ourselves, a higher expression of our own true nature. And the secret there, the wisdom is, she says, surrender. When she walks back through the portal, surrender, Stephen. What does that mean? What does surrender really mean? It doesn't mean to give up. That's what it means to the egoic conscious mind. I'm just going to surrender, which means I'm going to do nothing and just live with my fate and just be stuck with life. No, that's not what surrender means in this case. It means to overcome yourself, to rise above yourself, to no longer react like a puppet on a string to the stimuli of life and be unconscious. It means to awaken to what you truly are. And how do you do that? What is surrender? It's communion. It's coming into union with the whole of life, with the divine here and now. It's making your atonement, which means finding at one-ment with divine presence, to merge with the one divine essence here and now. But in order to do that, you've got to get out of the way. And we've talked about it so many times. That's the hard part, because what has to go, what has to die, is who you think you are. And man, holding on to that, it's holding on to what I'm right and you're wrong, and I'm just because of my limited experience in life and what I've gone through, I think I know. And you can't teach a mind that thinks it knows. We can only learn. That's why it says become like a child. The ancient wisdom is become like a child so you can enter the kingdom of good. What does that mean? Empty yourself. Have a beginner's mind. Open to the truth here and now, right? Because as we do that, we're renewed, we're restored again. And that's what the power of surrender really is.
I think it's important to remember that the Ancient One says to Stephen Strange, arrogance and fear still keep you from learning the simplest and most significant lesson of all, which is, it's not about you, which is
not
true.
About
yeah.
You. It's not about us as a unique individual. It's about what we truly are, which is the magic of life, which is love, which is life, which is the one being that we all are. We're all part of that. We're all the waves on the surface of that one being. But it's about coming back into and knowing thyself and being thyself. Because when you are, you're one with all being. And so there's just this natural connectedness, this unity, this feeling of love, this feeling of community. Now our actions are come from an energy of wholeness, come from an energy of love, come from an energy of compassion and understanding and givingness. When we tap into that whole, we tap into the power that creates universes. We tap into life itself, and we feel so whole and complete that we don't want anything anymore, because we feel like we already have it. We lack nothing, and it's from that place that our heart opens and we give the true magic of life.
Great. I think a good question, because we're talking about magic and stuff, and there's a lot of sorcerers, and Mordo, the Ancient One, and Doctor Strange, I think, all have different viewpoints, right? Like, Mordo is very strict and by the book, who doesn't want to play around with anything, you know what I mean? Like, darkness is darkness, light is light, like, we can't mess with the rules, or like, especially the amulet constantly with the Infinity Stone in it, like, you can't play around with things. The Ancient One of Doctor Strange is willing to play with stuff because, he's tricky, he's cunning, and the Ancient One has been known to dive into darkness for some of her power. And I guess the question is, Mordo, in the after credit scene, he doesn't do anything that's totally on the path of righteousness either, because he takes power away from people.
Right.
But is it wrong to be curious in possibility? Like when you have these, when you understand a power, is there any way to abuse power that's so pure?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not wrong. It never is. In fact, curiosity is what keeps us exploring, is what keeps us alive in life, is what keeps us moving forward and expanding, learning and growing. Um, the curiosity is the answer longing to be found. It's it begs us to ask questions and to want to learn more and to discover more. And what it is all along is it's the answer wanting to be found that brings this curious nature, this inquisitive nature. When we are stepping outside the known, we step outside our comfort zone, and so the ego's job is to protect us. The conscious rational mind is to protect us. And so what it wants to do is say, come back, don't go there. That's dangerous. That's the unknown. That's where trouble happens. Mm-hmm. But it's the only place where we step beyond who we've known ourselves to be and discover what we're truly capable of. What is out of the infinite possibilities, which ones will we allow to manifest through in and as us. So to have that curious nature, to have that inquisitive mind, to keep coming back and emptying ourselves and have a beginner's mind. See, we all think we know, no matter what age we are, no matter what we've experienced in life, we think we know. Oh, been there, done that. I know how life is. Why? Because you've had certain experiences and they've taught you what life is. But they're only certain experiences. They're not the whole of life. So what happens is when we get into that place of I know already, we can't learn anymore. Our cup is full and there's no more room. So we have to keep coming back into the present moment and letting go. Because we've never been here. You've never been right here, right now, with all this particular circumstance the way it is. And so we don't know. We think we know. But when we bring the known into this present moment, we just relive it over and over and over again. Instead of opening ourselves to the infinite possibilities of divine good that are where here, when now, when we lose ourselves, when we silence our ego, when we surrender to life. What does that mean? That means accepting what is. Not that we don't want to change things, not that we don't want to improve things, but we first accept things the way they are. Why? Because it's the way they are right now. And that allows us to release all resistance, and releasing all resistance, that energy is free to flow again through in and as us, and it brings unprecedented insight, wisdom, intelligence. We become the answer. We become the solution. But we have to get beyond ourselves in order to allow that to happen. So staying curious is a really
So the curiosity is adaptation. It's the survive that the Ancient One was telling Stephen Strange, right? In the end, it's his way of adapting with it.
Right. So when he was on Mount Everest, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. A lot of times we won't change until, unfortunately, until we're forced to change, until we hit rock bottom, until a catastrophe happens, until our lives fall apart. And then we are forced to change. Why? Because we don't have an option. In order to survive, we need to change. He had no option. So he had to surrender. What was that? He had to enter the present moment so fully and believe in himself so completely and allow that greater being within him to emerge. And it surprised most him. Who was most surprised? He was. And that's the magic of all of this. We're most surprised when we tap into and tune into and merge with that inner being within us, the real you, the divine in you, the light in you, and you allow it to come forth. Now, it is the answer. It brings the solution. We don't have it. It has an intelligence and a wisdom that is informed by the whole. It is one with all of life. When we sit here with our analytical, rational thinking mind, we just looking through these very limited filters and we hardly see anything, and we try and navigate our lives based on that, as opposed to having that, but then bringing up with that, infusing that with this wisdom that can come from within.
That's good. We can all be a sorcerer then, right?
We're
we can all
yes.
help defend the realm with Stephen Strange
We're
himself.
all our own magicians. We're all our own Yodas. We're all our own, you know, the greatest teacher lies within. The greatest wisdom is in here.
And also
And when we
Yoda
tune
says,
in-
right, it's a balance too. It's a balance of the light and dark. So there is no, how dare you do this, or your curiosity is evil, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And even though he says, you should write that in the beginning of your spells and stuff like that, no, there is none of that.
There is none of that. It's
Yeah.
all just the light and the absence of the light. Dharmamu. So what's Dharma? So that's just the void. That's just the emptiness. But that's only that's the ego's perspective when there's this veil of separation right here. This veil of separation in this energy center where we are holding back our light. When we're living in darkness, it appears that the absence of everything is just emptiness and void and nothingness. And, well, who wants that? But what we miss is love's pure light is at the center of all of that. Light is. Darkness is simply the absence of light.
Well, also, the darkness, which was Dormammu, Doctor Strange doesn't kill the darkness. He doesn't
Right.
want to kill anyone. He's a doctor. He took his oath. He's not... He works with... He bargains with Dormammu. He
Right,
says,
right.
Dormammu, I've come to bargain with you. Like, that's the way that he approaches the darkness. He finds a different solution.
Yeah.
He doesn't vanquish the darkness. It's
Right,
not
right.
I am righteous, I will kill the darkness.
Right. And you can't fight that element of your own self. It's like you don't whatever we send out comes back to us. So it's not about fighting, it's not about resisting, it's not about attacking, it's not about defending ourselves against something. It's about becoming whole. It's about waking up to the truth. It's about allowing your inner light to shine forth through, in, and as you, and you awaken from the dream of separation. And then, remember, we've talked about this in past podcasts. There is no separation. There is no Dormammu. There is no this. There is no that. There's no force outside of you. When you are connected with the divine light of presence, and you are one and unified with all of life, there's nothing you could possibly fear. There's nothing, because there's nothing outside. There's nothing separate from you. You're one with all that is. So that whole concept, just you lose that whole concept of separation and one force pitted against the other.
Well, in the most literal sense, too, Stephen Strange dies onto himself many times.
He does.
He willingly, he has
That's
no
a great
fear,
point. That's a great point. We didn't even think of that before. That is, you're going to die, you're going to fail. Yes, I'm going to, but he keeps doing that. And he's willing to go through one death after another death after another death until he, in a sense, transcends the need to do that anymore in himself.
Yeah.
It's really a great film. I mean, there's this one principle of you cannot beat a river into submission. That's what we're all trying to do in life. We're trying to beat up and force the reflections in the mirror, the things that, and the people and the circumstances outside of us to submit to the way we think things should be. But we must first surrender to that river, to that flow of divine energy, to the universal presence, so that we can come into our own sense of power and have an influence over that reality that we're perceiving. And that influence comes from within us. We don't have to reach out and try and manipulate the reflection we see in the mirror in the bathroom mirror. We don't like the way our hair looks, so we don't reach out in the mirror and try and change the reflection. We come home here and now. We realize our true power is to change ourselves, to be the change, and that's what they end up expressing in the end. He transforms himself.
Perfect. That sounds great to me. That's perfect. I mean, hey, Doctor Strange, he's great. He figures it out in the end. He's a powerful sorcerer by the end of it.
Yeah.
Is there any other the closing remarks that you can think of? Anything? Because everything about the river. I mean, that strikes me as the.
I mean, the key in the end. Remember when she was leaving? She was finally leaving this plane,
Yes.
and the surrender, Stephen, is what it is. Remember, surrender is not giving up. It's not acquiescing to some other higher power's will. No. Surrender is about aligning yourself with life itself, with the whole of life, with the power behind the whole universe. How? By overcoming who you think you are, by letting that go, by no longer feeding those reactive patterns. And that's how you give birth to a new you. That's what all the challenges in our world right now are about. It's about overcoming our reactive conditioning. It's about giving birth to a new you that has a higher function in this greater harmony that will be expressed. It's about realizing that the old ways of being won't work anymore, and that we literally must die into who we thought we were so that we can be born again, so that we can be renewed, so that we can be recreated in the miracle of life.
Great. This is awesome. Well, thank you, Ted, for another great conversation. With Warner Brothers releasing all this stuff, it's not only the superhero movies that inspired this, I think, like Wonder Woman, but also The Matrix 4 is on the list of Warner Brothers films.
Wow.
So, you know, like that's another reason to talk about Doctor Strange. But if you guys enjoyed this podcast, or this talk, I should say, with InnerMedia, you can check out the rest of the InnerMedias we have on YouTube. We've talked about Kung Fu Panda, Inception, and The Matrix, not to mention as well, so go and check those out. This is The Real You. We also do a podcast on Mondays called The True Podcast. You can check that out on Podbean, Apple Podcast, Spotify as well. Also, we have TED Talks on this, which is another video you can watch on YouTube. But to get all this information, to figure out meditations that are released and everything else, to contact us and everything, check out therealu.net, which is TheRealu.net. And there you could also ask us questions, or even comment in YouTube saying, hey, this movie's really cool. Talk about this movie. This has a really good spiritual message to it.
Yeah.
So I think the only way to end this off is giving a little bit of Doctor Strange like manipulation hand and say thank you guys for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.